Hello everyone. On this video we will be looking at multiplication of fractions. Alright, first we're going to look at what does it mean to multiply a fraction or multiply fractions. Alright, well, let's look at the following example. Let's say if we have 1/2 times 1/3. Okay, so 1/2 times 1/3 is just like saying 1/2 of 1/3. Okay, so if we have our 1/3. Okay, shade that in. That's our 1/3. Now, if we just redraw that, okay, that's our 1/3. What if we get half of that? And that's 1/2 of our 1/3. So when you're multiplying, 1/2 times 1/3 is just 1/6. All right. All right, so how do we know 1/2 of 1/3 is 1/6? Well, if you look at it without drawing all of the squares and everything else, 1/2 times 1/3 is just multiplying your numerators. So you have 1 times 1, and multiply your denominators over 2 times 3. So our 1 times 1 is 1, and our 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, so whether you choose to do it using the visual pictures or graphs or anything like that, or you just plan to do it this way, that's how you would get your answer. All right. So if you are still writing, feel free to press pause, but we're going to go ahead and do a few more examples. All right, so let's say for this example, we have 2/5 times 2/3. And you want your answer in the simplest form. All right, so just like before, 2/5 times 2/3, we're going to multiply our numerator, so we have 2 times 2. And then we're going to multiply our denominators, 5 times 3. Okay, so 2 times 2 is 4. And 5 times 3 is 15. Let me clean that up a little bit. And that is actually in its simplest form. You can't simplify it any more than that. All right, so how about you all do this one, let's say if you have 1/2 times 1/4, and let's say you do this one also, 7/8 of 2/3. All right, so go ahead and press pause and try to solve those two on your own. All right, so we'll go ahead and assume that you've already pressed pause and solved it. So let's go ahead and verify your answer. So you have 1/2 times 1/4, which is just 1 times 1, which is, well, I'll go ahead and write it out. 1 times 1 over 2 times 4, which ends up being 1/8. All right, so let's move on up to the next one. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways you could solve it. And either way will work. It's just kind of showing you, each approach. Okay, so if you have 7/8 of 2/3, that's the same as just saying 7/8 times 2/3. All right, so the first way of solving it is usually the easiest, but you make up your own mind as to which one you prefer. So you have 7/8 times 2/3, which is 7 times 2 over 8 times 3. Now, usually it's best to factor a number that can be factored before you multiply. So here, we know that 8 is 4 times 2. So we're just going to rewrite it. So you have 7 times 2. And instead of 8 times 3, we're going to replace the 8 with the 4 times 2. 4 times 2 times 3. So we still have 8 times 3. We just wrote it a little different. All right, so now as long as you're multiplying and you have the same value in the numerator and denominator, anything divided by itself is just 1. So those two cancel out and become 1. Okay, so that leaves you with 7 times 1 over 4 times 1 times 3. You don't really have to put the 1 down. You can just do 4 times 3, which is 7 over 12. And again, you can do it this way. It will work. Or you can do 7/8 times 2/3 is 7 times 2 over 8 times 3. And instead of replacing the 8 with 4 times 2, we just go ahead and multiply. So that's 14 over 24. Okay, so we can't leave that as our answer because it's not in the simplest form. So we remember that 14 is 7 times 2. And 24 is 12 times 2. Okay, anything divided by itself is just 1, so those two cancel out. And you end up with 7 times 1, which is 7, over 12 times 1, which is 12. Okay, so either way you get the same answer. But it's sometimes, depending on how large the number would get once you multiply it, it's easier to factor before you multiply, and the number gets really big, and you have to try and figure out which value cancels and what are the factors and everything else. All right, so if you are still writing, feel free to press pause, but we're going to go ahead and move on to a few more examples. All right, so what if we have 8 over 12 times 3 over 16 in the simplest form. Remember, it could say simplest form or the lowest form. Either way, that's what we're looking to reduce it as far as it can be reduced. All right, so I want you to go ahead and press pause and go ahead and solve this one. All right, so I'm assuming you've pressed pause and you solved this one. So let's go ahead and verify your answer. Okay, so if we have 8 over 12 times 3 over 16, then that's just 8 times 3 over 12 times 16. All right, now this is where that first method I showed you on the previous example comes in handy. Because if we multiply 12 times 16, we then have to try and figure out how to simplify it from there. But if we remember here that 12 equals 4 times 3, and 16 is 8 times 2. Now remember, you can also put 16 as 4 times 4 and then change 8 to be 4 times 2. But since we know an 8 here and this 8 would cancel out, that's why I did it that way. But either way would work. Okay, so we have 8 times 3 over 12, but instead of 12, we're going to do 4 times 3. 4 times 3 times, and instead of 16, we're going to put 8 times 2. And this is where the things start to cancel out. We have the 8 in the denominator and the 8 in the numerator. They cancel each other out and become 1. We have a 3 in the numerator and a 3 in the denominator. They cancel out and become 1. So you have 1 times 1 in your numerator over 4 times 1 times 1 times 2. You don't have to put the 1s if you don't want to. So we have 4 times 2, which is 1/8. Right, so it's a lot easier to do it this way than sit back and try to multiply 12 times 16 and then somehow try to simplify 24 over whatever that multiple happens to be. All right, so let's go to this example. Let's say for problem A, we have clean up that a little bit. 3 over 32 of 4/15, and for problem B, 3/2 of 2/3. Okay, so again, go ahead and press pause and work those out for yourself. Alright, so I'm assuming you've gone ahead and press pause and you finished writing out your answers. So let's go ahead and verify them. Okay, so 3 over 32 of 4/15. That's just, let's move that up a little bit. 3 over 32 times 4/15. Or 4/15, which is 3 times 4 over 32 times 15. And again, if you want to multiply 32 times 15 and then try to simplify it from there, you can. It's just going to be a lot more work. It's easier to simplify it before these numbers are multiplied. All right, so 32, we know 32 is 8 times 4. So 32 equals 8 times 4. And 15 is 5 times 3. All right, so we go ahead and replace it. We have 3 times 4 over 32, which is 8 times 4, times 15, which is 5 times 3. So now we go ahead and do our canceling. You have a 4 in your numerator and a 4 in your denominator. They cancel out and become 1. You have a 3 in your denominator and a 3 in your numerator. They cancel out and become 1. So you end up with 1 times 1, which is 1, over 8 times 5 times 1 times 1. You don't have to put the 1s there. You have 8 times 5. Well, I'll go ahead and write it out. 1 times 1, which gives you 1 over 40. So that's problem A. All right, so now let's go ahead and solve problem B. Okay, so 3/2 of 2/3. That is just 3 over 2 times 2 over 3, which is 3 times 2 over 2 times 3. This 3 cancels, and that 3 cancels and becomes 1. This 2 cancels, and this 2 cancels and becomes 1. So you end up with 1 times 1 over 1 times 1, which is 1 over 1, and any value divided by itself is equal to 1. All right. Okay, so if you are still writing, by all means, feel free to press pause. But we're going to go ahead and move on to our next example. Okay, so what if you have 12 over 8 times 15 over 9 in simplest form, and write your answer as a mixed number. All right, so what I want you to do, once again, go ahead and press pause and try to solve this one on your own. Alright, so I'm assuming you've pressed pause and you've solved this one. So once again, we're going to verify your answer. Excuse me. Okay, so you have 12 over 8 times 15 over 9, which is 12 times 15 over 8 times 9. Okay, so we know here that 12, 4 times 3. We know 15 is 3 times 5. We know that 8 is 4 times 2. And we know that 9 is 3 times 3. All right, so instead of 12, we're going to put 4 times 3 times 15. Instead of 15, we're going to put 3 times 5. Over 8. Instead of 8, we're going to put 4 times 2 times, and instead of times 9, it's going to be times 3 times 3. All right, so once again, we go ahead and get all of our canceling done at the beginning before we do our multiplying. So we have a 4 in your numerator and denominator. Those 2 cancels out, and you get a 1. You have a 3 in your denominator, well, numerator, and a 3 in your denominator. They cancel out and become 1. You have another 3 in your denominator and numerator. That becomes 1 and that becomes 1. So you end up with 1 times 1 times 1 times 5, which is just 5, over 1 times 2 times 1 times 1, which is just 2. Okay. But in order, the answer is correct, but they want it as a mixed number. So 5 over 2 is just 2 and 1/2 as a mixed number. All right, so if you're a little bit rusty on the mixed numbers, feel free to go back and look at the video on mixed numbers. All right, so what if we have a whole number times a fraction? Okay, so for this example, what if we have 4 times 7/8? Okay, so do this one, just remember that 4 is equal to 4 over 1. So if we had 5 times 7/8, it would just be 5 over 1. If we had 12 times 7/8, it would be 12 over 1. So we're just going to rewrite our whole number as a fraction of that whole number over 1. So you have 4 times 7/8 is just 4 over 1 times 7/8, which is 4 times 7 over 1 times 8. And again, we can see here that 8, we can replace that with 4 times 2. So you have 4 times 7 over 1 times 4 times 2. So we have a 4 in our numerator and denominator, so those two will cancel out. So you have 1 times 7, which is 7, over 1 times 2, which is 2. And if they wanted us to write it as a mixed number, that would be 3 and 1/2. All right. So let's look at if you have a mixed number times a fraction. All right, so let's say for this example, we have 3 and 5/6 times 3 over 10. All right, so to solve this one, first you must convert your mixed number to an improper fraction. Now once we do that, we can go ahead and multiply. Okay, so we have 3 and 5/6 times 3/10. Okay, so we go ahead and convert our mixed number. So you have 6 times 3, which is 18, plus 5 is 23. So you have 23 over 6 times 3 over 10. So if we multiply it, we have 23 times 3 over 6 times 10. Okay, so remember, 6 is 2 times 3, and 10 is 2 times 5. So we have 23 times 3 over, instead of 6, we put 2 times 3, times 10, instead of 10, we put 2 times 5. Okay, so you can see here, the 3's kind of cancel out. So that leaves us with 23 times 1 over 2. We can leave we don't have to worry about the 1 here if you don't want to. 2 times 2 times 5. And just put that right below it, which is 23 over 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 5 is 20. And if we wanted to write that as a mixed number, it would be 1 and 3/20. Okay, so if you notice, if you wanted to, you could have left the 10 as just 10. You didn't have to break it down to 2 times 5 because there was no 2 or 5 in the numerator that would have canceled with that one. So if you wanted to, you could have left it as 10 at 10 instead of breaking it down. But sometimes you just want to be safe, better safe than sorry. So you go ahead and break it down to 2 times 5. That's perfectly fine. All right. So if you are still writing, feel free to press pause. But we're going to go ahead and jump to our last few examples. All right, so let's say for this example, we have 1 and 4/5 times 1 and 3/4. So we have a mixed number times a mixed number. Okay, now in this case, you have to convert both mixed numbers to improper fractions in order for you to be able to multiply. Okay, so you have 1 and 4/5 times 1 and 3/4. So if we go ahead and convert those, 5 times 1 is 5, plus 4 is 9. So that's 9 over 5 times 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7, 7 over 4. Now we go ahead and just multiply it across. So 9 times 7 over 5 times 4. Okay, so if you look at it closely, you'll see the 9 can be factored to 3 times 3, and the 4 can be factored to 2 times 2. But if you do that, there's still, if you factor the 4 to 2 times 2, there's no 2 in the numerator to cancel out. If you factor the 9 and make it 3 times 3, there's no 3's in the denominator to cancel out. So in this case, you don't have to worry about doing that. You can just leave it like this and multiply it across, which is 63 over 20. And if you want to write that as a mixed number, that would be 3 and 3/20. All right. So if you are, if you're still writing, we still have a couple more we can do. So what if you wanted to solve, let's say for problem A, 34 times 2 and 3/17. For problem B, 11 and 6/7 times 7/8. And for problem C, 2 and 1/2 times 3 over 5 times 8 over 9. All right. So I want you to go ahead and press pause and solve all 3 of those on your own. All right, so assuming you're already done, so let's go ahead and verify your answers. Okay, so for problem A, 34, remember when you have a whole number, you want to rewrite it as a fraction, so that becomes 34 over 1. Times, and when you have a mixed number, you want to go ahead and convert that into an improper fraction. 17 times 2 is 34, plus 3 is 37. Okay, so that gives us 34 times 37 over 1 times 17. Okay. Now that 34 times 37 could make this problem get really messy and long really fast. But you notice here that 34 is actually 17 times 2. So we can rewrite it as 17 times 2 instead of 34 times 37. 17 times 2 times 37 over 1 times 17. So now we have a 17 in the numerator and a 17 in the denominator that will cancel out and become 1. So you have 1 times 2 times 37, or you can just have 2 times 37 over 1 times 1, which is just 1. So that would just be 74 over 1, which is just 74, because any value divided by 1 is just that value. So 74 over 1 is just 74. All right, so for problem B, you have 11 and 6/7 times 7/8. We're going to convert our mixed number. 7 times 11 is 77, plus 6 is 83. We have 83 over 7 times 7/8. So that's 83 times 7 over 7 times 8. All right, so we can see here our 7s cancel each other out, which leaves us with 83 times 1 over 1 times 8, which is equal to 10 and 3/8 if you convert it to a mixed number. All right, so look at problem C. You have 2 1/2 times 3/5 times 8 over 9. It doesn't matter if you're multiplying 2 values, 3 values, 4 values, 5 values. Doesn't matter at all. It's all the same approach. So 2 1/2, so you have 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So you have 5 over 2 times 3 over 5 times 8 over 9. Okay, so that's just 5 times 3 times 8 over 2 times 5 times 9. Now, if you wanted to, right this very moment, you could cancel out the 5s, but I'm going to save that step into the next one because I want to go ahead and replace 8 with 4 times 2, and I want to replace 9 with 3 times 3. So I'll do all my canceling in one step in the next one. So, like I said, if you wanted to, you could do it right now and not worry about it, but either way is good. So you have 5 times 3, and instead of 8, we put 4 times 2 times 4 times 2 over 2 times 5. And instead of times 9, we put times 3 times 3. And now we just cancel away. We have our 5 in the numerator and 5 in the denominator. We have our 3 in the numerator and our 3 in the denominator. And we have a 2 in the numerator and a 2 in the denominator. So that leaves us with 1 times 4 times 1, which is just 4, over 1 times 1 times 1 times 3, which is just 3. Or if you wanted to rewrite that as a mixed number, that would be 1 and 1/3. Okay, so either way, you'd get the same answer. All right, so hopefully this made sense, and I will see you on the next video.